Okay, hey guys, Paul here again. So today I wanted to sort of address something that I see happen a lot in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, particularly kind of at the local card shop level, and you also see a fair bit of it online. It's happened for years, so it's not like a particularly new thing, but it's the idea that, a person's sort of worth as a Yu-Gi-Oh player is tied directly to their skill or sort of acumen or accomplishments within Yu-Gi-Oh. Now, this is something that I've discussed a little bit in the past, but I feel like it's always worth bringing up because it's something that I notice happens, at my local card shop scenes, and I hear people talk about this so much, and of course, I just see it in online discourse. So, to explain a little bit more about what I mean by that, there's always kind of been this divide at many card shops between the players who are very competitive and the players who aren't. We're not gonna like get into all the specifics and nuance and take sides on like whether or not casual or competitive is good or bad because they both have their very, very, toxic ends, right? Like it's just two ends of the same spectrum. But the thing is, I do find that there are a lot of sort of people who write off another person's sort of opinion on issues in the game or card shop stuff or whatever because they maybe haven't like topped a regional or gotten an invite at a regional or maybe because they don't go to YCS events as often. And I think that there is maybe just the smallest baseline of truth that could be in that, but I think it goes way too far. So yes, if a player, plays more casual decks, more budget decks, they don't, win the tournament every weekend, then I suppose I could see where you might not want to go to them for like play testing for a YCS, sure. Or maybe, like they might not have like, I guess as I'm even hesitant to say that. Like maybe their opinions on like what cards should or shouldn't be banned. Maybe like you could say that it's less informed, I guess. But I'm really even hesitant to say that because I still feel like people all kind of are playing the same game. Like we're all still playing Yu-Gi-Oh. So just because maybe somebody is like more casual than you, it doesn't mean that like their experience with Yu-Gi-Oh is invalid. And it doesn't mean that they like aren't sort of worthy of playing the game. An interesting sort of thing that happened or that I kind of heard about more so recently at a card shop was just somebody getting like, when people sort of create their idea of like what players like better than another player, like, okay, here's like the best players in this area, or this card shop or whatever, and like here are the players who are, worse or whatever. People kind of will only see a person's value as like how good are they relative to the rest of the like local scene. But the thing is, local card shops and local communities are based on a number of things. They're based number one on like attendance. So when I see people say stuff like that, like, oh, these scrubby players, don't they just, I don't even know why they're playing this game, or they should just like quit, or if you can't afford the game, just quit. No, I don't think that's right because if you didn't have casual players at your card shop or more budget players or just people who maybe don't take the game as seriously as you, then the card shop will be surprisingly barren. If you take maybe the average card shop that gets a weekly tournament of like, let's say a dozen, 1 to 2 dozen people, yeah, you'll have maybe a handful of very competitive types who oftentimes are winning and like you're getting like the top 2, 3, 4 spots. But a lot of people maybe they might seem like just bracket padding fodder for you, like oh these are just the easy wins. The fact of the matter is, without those people, your tournament might only be like 6 people. And a 6 person tournament scene every single week that maybe slowly dwindles is not very good, and it will probably peter out. It's important to have those people who aren't maybe playing the best decks but are still willing to play and enter the tournaments. And that matters not just for like, the competitive integrity of everything, but also for the card shop where you go. So casual players still buy lots of packs to open. They still, just show up to the shop and purchase other things like sleeves and deck boxes and that sort of thing. And just them entering the tournament is sort of a source of income for a local card shop. So it's important to keep all that in mind when you are just sort of like writing people's opinions off or their input off on things. And you have to really understand that people just play the game for different things. I think the biggest misunderstanding that happens here is that people assume that everyone is playing Yu-Gi-Oh for the same reason they're playing Yu-Gi-Oh. So just because you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh with the intention of always winning, always playing the best deck, always finding the best strategies, and going to every regional you can, and going to every YCS you can, and I'm not saying that that's wrong, by the way. That's a perfectly fine way to play the game. But I'm just saying that just because somebody is not as serious about being the best, as intense about it, is not as willing to spend the money, that does not mean that they're not like a useful Yu-Gi-Oh player. And it also does not mean that they are a less worthwhile human being. That's kind of the darker side of it that I've seen sometimes, is oftentimes people will sort of start to think that just because a person isn't good at Yu-Gi-Oh, it means that they just aren't a smart person. Because if you're good at Yu-Gi-Oh, that must mean like you're smarter than everybody else in the room, or that you are just, you're able to strategize better. You're just better at games in general because you're good at Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't know why it is that this happens so much. I guess it's just any competitive game gets this way, but I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh certainly has it and higher amounts than other card games and like communities that I've seen. It's just like everybody in this game seems to want to be the best so badly, and there's a lot of like weight that seems put on the idea of like, have you gotten regional tops? Have you gotten, like a day two at a YCS? All these things, and oftentimes what I sort of find myself thinking with all of that is, most people who sort of act that way and are like hyper focused on just being the best and kind of want to put down the rest of the people at like a card shop or online or whatever, they're usually middling at the end of the day. And by that I mean that, yeah, you might be the big fish in the small pond at your card shop, but when you go to a regional or YCS, you're kind of just like everybody else, because in those more competitive environments, you might just sort of, scrub out, as they say, and just go X3 and just drop and quit. And you might have been playing maybe one of the best decks in the room. Maybe you are playing Tarlaments or some Sprite Adventure pile thing, whatever the best deck is, but it didn't change the fact that you still lost there. And so as a result, I just feel like placing value on people just because they're like willing to spend lots of money or play the best deck, it doesn't check out for me. Now, the last quick thing I'll say before people just assume that I'm just, being a Yugi boomer and just, casual players are toxic too. Yes, they are. There is definitely such a thing as, the casual elitist as well. So there are people who get very angry at competitive players just by default. You're playing the best deck and you shouldn't be doing that. No, it's fine. You can definitely play the best deck. If you're going to tournaments, it makes perfect sense for somebody to play the best deck and cards that are available to them and to, be ruthless in that regard. It doesn't matter if a lot of people are playing it or a few, you should play the best decks available to you if you're going to compete. And so I see people who would just sort of say like, oh, they're meta sheep, they have no originality, this, that, and the other. No, that isn't true. I think that it's fine to like want to compete. I'm just saying that placing value judgments on people because of how good they are at Yu-Gi-Oh, not good. And it also leads to people, tying their own self-worth to how good they are at Yu-Gi-Oh. I've seen plenty of players at local card shops doing this where they, are so caught up in how good they are at Yu-Gi-Oh, or believing that they have like this ego and skill and expectations that like when they don't win a tournament at their local shop or at a regional or whatever, you just see absolute meltdowns. People who just, like they can't, they're screaming, slamming tables, throwing cards, leaving sometimes, and just, just complete meltdowns, right? Explosions, because you didn't win your shop's like case tournament or something. And honestly, I don't get it. I think that you just have to remember it's just a game. It's a game where being competitive is fine and being casual is fine, and like, it's good to be proud of yourself for doing well, but don't be so hard on yourself, and don't be, hard on other people. Don't be surprised that someone else doesn't care about it and is not as willing to get sweaty with it as you are. And don't put yourself through this much frustration over a game that has, some elements of RNG. It has some elements of competition that you can't control. Yeah, I don't know. So I see this happen a lot. It's a big deal in real life at locals, and of course you'll see it in plenty of online arguments. People getting written off because they play too casually, or because they play, a lower, it's like a certain type of deck. Like, oh, you play Fluanderies or Eldritch, that must mean you don't have, any skill, or you can't think for yourself, or whatever. All these things. I say, like, you got to leave all that behind. Whether you want to compete or be casual, just remember, everyone's playing the same game, and everybody's here to enjoy it a little bit differently. It's not a direct sort of correlation to your intelligence, your worth as a human being, your right to play the game and go to the card shop or whatever. It's just Yu-Gi-Oh. All right, it's gonna be it. Hopefully this didn't come across as like too negative. I think it's something that we really just need to work on improving more than anything. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Subscribe to APS Plus, and leave your opinions on this in the comments. Try to be respectful of other people though. All right, see you in the next one. Fast turn.